Imagine a man with a simple yet important mission who spoke little, but every word carried immense weight because it came from God. That man was Obadiah, a prophet whose book in the Bible is small, but with a very important message. His name means servant of the Lord, and he was chosen to deliver a serious and urgent message about the future of a nation, Edom. At the time Obadiah received this message, Israel was going through a very difficult period. Jerusalem had been destroyed by the Babylonian army. The cities were devastated, the walls had fallen, the temple was plundered, and many Israelites had been taken as prisoners. It was as if the heart of the people had been ripped out. And, amidst so much suffering, Edom, descendants of Jacob's brother Esau, not only refused to help, but also took advantage of the situation to despise and harm Israel. To better understand this story, we need to remember Jacob and Esau, the twin brothers who gave rise to the nations of Israel and Edom. Jacob and Esau already had a complicated relationship from a young age. Esau, who was the eldest son, lost the birthright and the blessing that should have been his because of impulsive choices and tricks played by Jacob. Although the two reconciled later, their families went different ways, and the rivalry between them never ended. Edom, formed by the descendants of Esau, always looked at Israel, the descendants of Jacob, with envy and resentment. The Edomites lived in mountains filled with cliffs and caves, which made them feel secure and superior. Meanwhile, Israel was known as the chosen people of God, blessed with special promises. This contrast fueled a bitterness that was passed down from generation to generation. Now, in Israel's moment of greatest vulnerability, formed by the descendants of Jacob, Edom not only remained indifferent, but took cruel actions. They rejoiced over the destruction of Jerusalem, plundered what they could from the unprotected cities, and even handed over fleeing Israelites to their enemies. It was as if the Edomites were saying, "Finally, you are getting what you deserve." This attitude was a very painful betrayal. It was in this context that Obadiah was raised by God to declare a message of judgment. Although his book is short, the smallest in the Old Testament, it carries impressive power. His prophecy was not only against Edom, but also a reminder to all nations. God is just and sees everything. He does not ignore injustice, arrogance, or a lack of compassion. Obadiah brought a clear and powerful voice, announcing that Edom's time was coming to an end. The message God gave to Obadiah was direct and strong. Edom, the people descended from Esau, had crossed every limit. They were arrogant, cruel, and completely indifferent to Israel's suffering, and God saw all of it. Judgment was on the way, and Obadiah's prophecy was clear. Edom would reap exactly what it had sown, and that would be destruction. God accused Edom of being full of pride. They trusted in their high and inaccessible mountains, believing they were secure. From their fortresses, they considered themselves invincible and thought, "Who can bring us down? Who can reach us up here?" But God, through Obadiah, responded, "Though you soar like the eagle and make your nest among the stars, I will bring you down from there." Obadiah chapter 1 verse 4. God made it clear that no place would be safe from his judgment. Edom's problem was not only pride, but also a lack of compassion. For a long time, they had a hostile relationship with Israel, but during Jerusalem's fall, their actions were even crueler. When Israel faced one of the worst moments in its history, Edom did not help. Instead, they rejoiced at the suffering of the people of Israel. They laughed as Jerusalem's walls were destroyed and took the opportunity to plunder the goods left behind by the Babylonian invaders, enriching themselves with others' misfortune. And that was not all. Many Israelites tried to flee the chaos and find a safe place, but Edom, instead of offering help, captured those fugitives and handed them over to their enemies. By doing so, Edom not only ignored Israel's suffering, but made it even worse. This betrayal was something God condemned severely because it showed that Edom had a hardened heart, incapable of feeling compassion, even for their own blood relatives. Obadiah's prophecy brought an important lesson. Whoever commits injustice will sooner or later face the consequences. God sees everything that happens among the nations. He does not overlook any injustice, any act of pride, or any moment of indifference to the suffering of others. Edom thought it could act however it pleased and escape unpunished, but God made it clear that this would not happen. What they had done to Israel would come back to them. Their fortresses would be destroyed, their own allies would betray them, and their riches would be taken away. Obadiah's message was not just for Edom. It serves as an eternal reminder. God is just. He does not tolerate arrogance, oppression, or disdain for the most vulnerable. And above all, He is the protector of those who trust in Him, even in the most difficult moments. When this prophecy was announced, we can imagine how it impacted Edom and Israel. For Edom, it was a clear message. Their destruction was inevitable. For Israel, it was a reminder that even in the worst moments, God was still in control. This message remains valid today and makes us reflect. Are we living with justice and compassion as God teaches us, or are we relying only on our own strength and ignoring others? Obadiah warns us that everything we sow, we will one day reap. Obadiah's message was not just a warning, it was a definitive and inescapable sentence. God, who rules over all creation, had decided that Edom's time was over. No fortress was high enough, no ally was trustworthy enough, and no hiding place would be safe from God's judgment. Obadiah declared that Edom's total destruction was very near, and that this would serve as an example for all nations. The Edomites felt completely secure in their mountains. The high rocks of Seir were like natural walls, and they thought no one could bring them down. They trusted so much in their location that they believed themselves untouchable. But God, through Obadiah, revealed that danger would come from where they least expected. Your own allies will betray you. Those who say they are your friends will set a trap for you. Obadiah chapter 1, verse 7. Edom would discover the hard way that their trust was misplaced. Obadiah also made it clear that Edom's defenses would not work. No matter how strong they seemed, not even their warriors would be able to protect the nation. And Edom's wise men, known for their intelligence, would not find a way out. On that day, said the prophet, I will destroy the wise men of Edom and the understanding of the mountain of Esau. Obadiah chapter 1, verse 8. Edom's pride would be the cause of their downfall, and all human strategies would be useless before the power of God. The judgment of Edom was not just a punishment for that nation, it was a demonstration of who God is, the sovereign over all nations. He is not only the God of Israel, but the judge of the entire earth. Obadiah made this very clear when he said, The day of the Lord is near for all nations. Obadiah chapter 1, verse 15. This means that no one can escape God's watchful eye. Edom was chosen as an example, but the message applies to everyone. What we do to others, we will one day face in return. Injustice, pride, and oppression will be judged everywhere. Imagine the impact of this message at that time. Edom, a people who seemed strong and invincible, would be destroyed. Their cities would be abandoned, their riches stolen, and their land left empty and desolate. But the warning went beyond Edom. It was a cautionary message for all nations. Edom's pride, its trust in riches and allies, and its lack of compassion would be lessons for the world. God was showing that no one is above His justice. Obadiah leads us to think about something greater, the day of the Lord. This day is not just a future event, it is the moment when God sets all accounts straight. He sees everything we do and will bring both good and evil to light. When we hear about the judgment of Edom, we must ask ourselves, how are we living? Are we trusting only in our own strength like Edom? or seeking refuge in the Lord. The story of Edom is not just a warning from the past, it is a current and powerful reminder. The day of the Lord is near, and God is just. He sees everything, rules over all things, and fulfills his promises, both of judgment for the proud and of redemption for the faithful. But Obadiah's message does not end with destruction. It points to something much greater and full of hope, the restoration of Israel and the victory of God's people. The prophet shows us that while Edom would face complete ruin because of its arrogance and cruelty, Israel, even after so much pain and suffering, would be exalted and restored. This restoration is the fulfillment of God's promises to those who trust in him. Imagine the people of Israel hearing these words during a time of great sorrow. Jerusalem was destroyed, the walls had fallen, the temple was in ruins, and many Israelites had been taken far away as prisoners. They likely thought that God had abandoned them and that the promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had been forgotten. But through Obadiah, God showed that he never abandons his people. The judgment of Edom was just one part of the story. The ending would be full of glory for those who remained faithful to God. Obadiah announced that Mount Zion, the heart of Jerusalem and the place where God revealed himself to his people, would be holy once again. He said, "But on Mount Zion will be deliverance. It will be holy, and the house of Jacob will possess its inheritance." Obadiah chapter 1, verse 17. For a devastated people, these words were like a ray of hope. The mountain that was once the center of sacrifices and worship would be restored, and the people of God, who seemed to have lost everything, would inherit their land once again. This restoration would not be merely physical, such as rebuilding walls or houses, but also spiritual. Mount Zion would once again become a symbol of purity, justice, and renewed fellowship with God. These words showed that even in the most difficult moments, God still had a plan for his people. The contrast between Edom and Israel is striking. While Edom, who trusted in its mountains and riches, would be reduced to nothing, Israel, which seemed completely defeated, would be lifted up and glorified. Edom's destruction would serve as an example of divine justice, but Israel's exaltation would be living proof of God's faithfulness. What seemed impossible to human eyes, the restoration of a destroyed nation, would be accomplished by the power of God. Obadiah also points to something even greater. The kingdom will be the Lord's. Obadiah chapter 1, verse 21. This was not just a promise for Israel, it was a vision of a future where God would reign over all nations. Israel would not be restored only for itself, but as part of a greater divine plan. God would use its redemption as a testimony of his sovereignty and goodness, showing that he fulfills his promises even when everything seems lost. This prophecy brings a powerful message for us today. Just as Israel faced destruction, many of us go through moments of loss, sorrow, and despair, wondering if there is hope. But Obadiah reminds us that God is faithful. He not only judges the proud and unjust, but also exalts and restores those who trust in him. Mount Zion, restored and holy, points us to the day when God will renew all things. The story of Obadiah is not just about the judgment of Edom. It is a story of redemption and hope, a story that reminds us that God never abandons his own. Even when we face ruins, he is already working toward restoration. In the end, the kingdom will be the Lord's, and those who remain faithful will inherit his eternal promise. Although Obadiah's prophecy was written thousands of years ago, its message resonates with striking relevance today. Edom's pride, its indifference to Israel's suffering, and its misplaced trust in human fortresses reflect attitudes we still encounter in the modern world. The human heart has changed little, and divine justice remains unchanging. Obadiah shows us that God is against pride. Edom believed it was unshakable, secure in its mountains and political alliances, but it forgot that no height or fortress can escape God's gaze. Today, how often do we place our trust in fleeting things, material possessions, status, power, or even our own abilities? Pride, as with Edom, can lead us to believe we are above judgment, but Obadiah reminds us that God resists the proud and exalts the humble. Injustice was also severely condemned in Obadiah's message. Edom not only remained indifferent to Israel's suffering, but also contributed to it, taking advantage of its brother's vulnerability. This behavior prompts us to reflect on our own actions. Do we ignore the suffering around us? Do we rejoice in or take advantage of others' failures? Divine justice requires us to have compassionate hearts and hands ready to help, especially the most vulnerable. Indifference, perhaps Edom's greatest sin, serves as a sharp warning for our times. In a world where it is easy to become distracted by our own concerns, are we attentive to the suffering of others? God made it clear through Obadiah that he does not overlook those who close their eyes to the pain of others. His justice reaches even the smallest details of our attitudes. Above all, Obadiah's prophecy is a powerful reminder that God is just. He not only saw Edom's sins, he acted. And just as in the past, God continues to govern sovereignly. He will judge all nations and all people. Nothing escapes his vision, and no injustice will go unanswered. And here lies the great reflection. Are we living like Edom, trusting in our strength and despising others, or like Israel, seeking the kingdom of God? This question challenges us to examine our hearts and priorities. Are we approaching God with humility, acknowledging our dependence on Him, or relying on fortresses that in the end cannot sustain us? Obadiah's message is not just about the past. It is a call for the present. It is a reminder that even amidst chaos, God is in control. He is building His kingdom where justice, compassion, and humility will prevail. The decision is before us. Will we continue to live like Edom, proud and indifferent, or will we choose the path of Israel, seeking God and trusting in His promises? This is the choice that will shape not only our present, but also our eternity. Now write in the comments if you already knew about this prophecy of the prophet Obadiah. Leave a like, share this message with more people, and subscribe to the channel to watch more videos like this one. May God bless you.